Good evening, everyone. System Chalk here with the 202nd episode of Book of Hours, our first run on YouTube. New day in winter, playing as the artist. Let's do a quick recap of what the artist is. Data was a start, the Surrealist Manifesto, a step along the road, but only a step. The road goes nowhere unless it goes into the wood, and that's a road we can only walk in the dark. Wait, no, not in the dark, in blood. Hip deep in blood. Oh, shut up, give it to me, I'll write it. So, we've made some commitments to the Tree of Wisdoms, but I was held up a little bit by the, basically a bit of a roadblock in terms of a lot of level 3 skills. So we will eventually unblock that, but it'll be a lot more helpful to know what I'm working with as far as elements of the soul or sorry, not elements. Well, yeah, actually elements of the souls that I need, but also some of the lessons learned. So our big milestone for this season is going to be Oriflamme's first. And then on top of that, once I exhaust the library, then we can start, investigating paintings and things like that throughout the house. So I'm going to use the fast forward a little bit more than I normally do, but that's just because I would like to try and get through the books reasonably quickly. Again, I don't need to... The point here isn't to just gobble all the content so much as I want to try and keep a fairly brisk pace for the playthrough, and in this case, well, for me, obviously, a brisk pace for the playthrough would have been over quite some time ago. But essentially what I want to do, if I can avoid if I can avoid long waits for no purpose, essentially because we know that we're really just going to be waiting on the various books, I don't necessarily want to just... sit in silence waiting for the minute to pass if I know there's no other action that we're going to be taking. So again, the big thing that'll change the tone for the playthrough right now is going to be the arrival of an offer from Oriflamme's. Excuse me. Sorry. Okay, Nona's desk, we'll use an Arab on that one. And we need some languages here. I think... Oh, no, we have two more, so... It's going to mess around a little bit with the order, but it seems like the library's gotten shuffled around anyway. I guess we can use metal in this case. Now, one thing I never did check was whether or not we can read with the Spire Prospect. I don't think so. Yeah. Okay, but we can still read the Iron Book because we've got the Consider. What do we have a surplus of? A little bit of everything, to be honest, but let's go... I'll use the Arab in this case. And then I did forget that I still want to go to the beach, so we'll use the Fett at Crowcross Sands. Okay, and again, this is one of those cases where it makes sense for me to speed things up a bit, just to see... Oops, an unfamiliar language, a half-familiar alphabet, like reversed Greek or upside-down Latin. My mouth feels oddly dry as I trace the letters with my fingers. I can't read it. So I think in this case, just so all the timers can line up, I'm going to leave this, I'll leave this one aside, and then we'll, I've carried a memory like a flambeau safe through the mazes of night. This will complete once dawn has come. But yeah, so we'll save the consider verb. We know we have more time in the day than we do elements of the soul. Afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. Twopence, or if you prefer, tuppence, a sort of Janus of pennies. The Journal of Walter DeWolf. Walter DeWolf, 3rd Baron Brankrug, was grandson of Thomas, son of the disgraced Giles, who eloped with Pale Halfren. The DeWolf line might have ended here if the Seneschal Ernestine, by then over 80, had not managed to reconcile Thomas with a dying Giles. Walter, though nominally siding with the parliamentarians, manages to stay out of the war, but in 1642 his son Brian runs away on the night of his 16th birthday and joins the Royalist army. He is captured and returned to his father, who pleads for mercy and gives his parole for his son's good behavior. In 1648, Brian runs away to join a Royalist uprising. Walter writes of news that Brian has been seen on the field of battle at Gear Camp, but that his fate is yet unknown. Walter writes one last entry about his fear for his son and the future of his family. There the journal ends, but the extensive account of Walter's collaboration with the architect Gregory Wheelock includes usefully esoteric information. The Chandler's Wish formula and instructions invoking Moth, Lantern, and exceptionally, paradoxically, the liminal and theoretical hour called the Chandler. The author is anonymous, admitting only that they are one who is not yet nameless. The author makes a passionate argument that the hour named Chandler is in fact the oldest, even though he does not exist, because he is supposedly the culminating event of a plan that precedes even Grail and Moth. Where the Chandler has passed, the understandings of the Colonel and the Lionsmith will wrench open truth. Where the Chandler will pass, Moth will pass before him. Inam, Kaplinginglingpur, Garki, and Krippus, in which 4 enigmatic figures tell the stories they've heard over the years at the Roost, the secret location where the Aviform Hours congregate. Inam, has not the beach crow shared his treasures? Garki, not the rarest. He takes those things most precious, which he claims found, not stolen. The beach crow, Kapinglingpur suggests, is not only a thief, but also a spy and even a voyeur. He has hidden the memory of secret couplings among the hours and their names in the corners of the house as treasures to gloat over. There is particularly fevered speculation on a liaison between the Ringyu, that fervent hour of the wood, and the mare in the tree, who sometimes has been the witch's sister. Okay. Old Coppernose and the Softer Metal, a disgraceful compendium of ribald poetry about the habits and corruptions of Henry VIII. Henry's great misfortune, his crushing injury at a jousting bout, has left him unable to stand any straighter than a splintered withy. The most savage mockery is reserved for Henry's great debasement, where the corruption of his softer metal is supposed to have crept into the coin of the realm. The last and most serious lampoon makes seditious references to the Crucible Revolution. That will be relevant when we look at the details in here. I'm sure we've talked about them before, but if not, we'll definitely go back to it. I always liked the translation on this one. So Opus Magnum Carulium. Ambrose Westcott used to render the title of this venerable and anonymous work mockingly as The Big Blue Business. A kinder translation would be The Great Work in Azure. The reasons for Westcott's enmity to this work are clear to any pyroglyphicist. It was written at least 2 centuries before he was born, but anticipates or undermines many of his preferred conclusions. The work in question is the creation of the blue gold allegedly necessary for the terrible rite which allows a forge long to become a name. The book mentions that pyroglyphics techniques can be used with forge to create iotic essence as a necessary component, but withholds the final step, insisting that the consequences are too dire and that any interest should remain only a matter of theory. The High Traditions of the Noble Endeavor, a blandly positive work on the Endeavor Club, published by the Endeavor Club. The club was founded in 1862, but claims to draw from much older traditions. Club members are assigned names out of noble myth, Joffrey, Roland, and unexpectedly Breadbettle. They claim to be heirs of the Leashed Flame, which gave the island of Britain such appalling power in some histories. Their endeavor itself is a purifying fire, which makes its fuel something more than human. This transformation, however, is no longer encouraged by the club, and perhaps, the work is coy on this, no longer permitted. The Book of Dissolution. Alexander Probst recovered a copy of this work from a mountain temple in Persia. Other copies surface now and then, usually seared on rock. The book consists mostly of prayers to the unburnt god, the Forge of Days, which consumes and transforms. It suggests the Forge's power arises partly from its nature and partly from its tools. The book describes an earlier house of the sun whose doors and ways were different. It praises the Forge of Days for opening the ways into the house and for transforming that which was to that which is, despite the screams of stone. I feel like this is a bigger one. Like, I know reading these things quite quickly tends to, I read sort of with the same pace and cadence lines which are rather significant. So talking about specifically the Forge of Days opening the ways to the house and for transforming that which was to that which is, despite the screams of stone. This is obviously a very significant event in the history, right? These are presumably the gods from stone and the sort of the overthrow. And the establishment of the current order. But I'll read that the same way that I sort of read, Bancroft spending 20 pages complaining about his relations or lack thereof with Fiona Ayrshire. Anyways, the sky of the soul, the grand labor of Cal, an ascetic poet writing at the court of the shadowless kings. Cal's verses are brief, obscure, and often dominated by images of violence. The star is a pinprick, but the sun is a wound. It is always possible to be deader, Cal states. The watchman goes before, none but 7 may go after. Yet surely we are born to the glory as the sparks fly upwards. Okay, I think that's it for books. So one last round for reading. So Iron Book. This time we'll remember the language. I'll feel very embarrassed if there's another Fusine text in this series. The Burning Woman. Guess we can use Whist here. Looks like we've had a pretty good run as far as avoiding conflicts with languages go. Sea-strewn, salt-snared stuff. Now, I may actually make some use of the wood, so I'll see if I can find a better place for it. I know it's getting a bit full. Okay, let's do this in the order again. So better now, we'll still go for the money. Ideally, I'll use the element... Well, actually, I guess there's no ideal. We still have a big stack of books, so it doesn't really matter quite the order in which we do things. But the Iron Book, a manual of the Order Limea, an order of quasi-immortals who maintained a secret enclave at the source of the river Limia in the Roman province of Hispania Gallicaea. This manual was compiled by one Milari Yivni, who claims to have traveled to join the Ordo from the crossroads of the waters. Members of the Ordo took an oath, the Iron Chain, that required them to remain hidden from the world. This manual includes presumably long obsolete addresses and passphrases that could have been used to find the Ordo's contacts in the town. The Ordo's contact in the town of Iria. The final part of the manual describes the punishments for Ordo members who break their oath of secrecy. This includes an invocation used to summon the spirit called King Crucible as an agent of vengeance. Yevgeny cautions that this must be a last resort when the Oathbreaker would otherwise go unpunished. Summoning King Crucible might draw the personal attention of the Forge of Days. A marginal note suggests, in any case, that King Crucible, in the most transcendent sulk of sulks, no longer leaves the Mansis. The Burning Woman, a transcription of the play by Menander the Victor, possibly the dramatist of that name, into Frisian with commentaries. The play describes a pilgrimage of smiths and adepts following the trail of the Burning Woman, who has appeared in all their dreams and given each a wound and a word. The smiths and adepts give up on finding the Burning Woman and resolve to build their own kingdom, where our strength will be sufficient to shatter the world. The manner in which the alchemist was spared. In 1782, Émile Verdier used this text as the basis for a presentation to the Academy of Sciences in Paris. He was executed in secret the following morning without trial. In the days of the Carapace Cross, when humanity lived in the dark and ate on its knees, humans could enter the Mansis like vermin. One learnt the arts of flint, the arts of shaping and remaking. Through the black, the yellow, the red, the unwise mortal ascended to the shadow of the Aegon hatching and remained in his service. He may be there to this day. The hunting journals of Brian DeWolf. Brian DeWolf, the son of the third Baron Brankrug, gives advice on hunting in the bounds. It is clear from Brian's journals that he sought unorthodox trophies and put them to unorthodox uses. He was in fact hanged as a witch at the age of 24 and never inherited the estate. Brian describes how a sky-inspired fife can be prepared using these furs and feathers techniques in the presence of greater sky aspect to make the winds good neighbors. It's a powerful technique to be described so casually. Brian's main interest seems to be in ensuring good weather for his hunts. The Key of Night, the deliberations leading to a manifesto of the Worms of a Scale, as recorded around 1900 in the bar Vienna and the cellar of the Hotel Ciervo in Noon. The Worms, all of whom use grandiose nom de guerre like Citizen Knife and the Midnight Pilgrim, agree that all previous iterations of their movement have been feckless and treacherous, and agree that the return of the pre-human hours, the gods from stone, is the true way to end the tyranny of eternity. The Worms identify the wheel, the tide, the flint, Sulochana, the spider door, the excellency Nathobasis, and the Wickle Indistinguishable as the 7 necessary pentiments that must be returned to every history through the propaganda of the deed. This is an eccentric list and clearly a compromise. The process of thrashing it out clearly exhausts all the participants who don't specify the necessary deed beyond a vague reference to the loopholes. Lady Ava's Repose, a meditation on the drowning of Lady Ava DeWolf and her 2 grandchildren, written in the years when the estate was abandoned by Father Theo, once the DeWolf family chaplain, one of the few to remain on the isle in those desolate years. There are so many stories of her heritage, so many rumors of her persistence. We might easily choose to believe that the grand twins escaped, even that they yet live beyond the sea. Father Theo has come to believe that Ava sought an escape from a family curse, the pale heritage of Hafren, her forebearer, or the curse placed upon her line by the cunning man Red William in the time of Hendrik de Wolf. He had begun believing neither curse was real, but as the book concludes, he decides that he is determined to believe in them, rather than accept the 3 deaths as a futile tragedy. One does not so easily escape the long necessity of faith, he concludes. Oop, I forgot. My deeds, my powers, my achievements, and the injustices perpetrated against me. A diatribe by Hokebald of Posend, formerly of the Order of Immortals called the House of Leith, later the Ordo Lamea, and much later the Obliviates. He has scores to settle. Hokebald boasts of his royal descent and insists that the magics of the Forge are more effective when practiced by those of noble blood. Posen complains of his condemnation by the Ordo Lamea. He acknowledges that he has undergone alterations after the consummation of that particular delight, but insists that these changes are both elegant and inevitable. Who is the fire and who is the fuel? He asks rhetorically. Annals of St. Brendan's. Over 100 years of the Abbey's annals from 1230 to 1350. 3 events of particular interest are here recorded. An endowment by Eva de Braus, widow of the martyr Lord Gwilym Du, Black William, which enables an expansion of the abbey, the construction of the Winter Tower, which is dedicated to the Madrigad, and the death by poisoning and arts unsanctioned of the Abbess Nona. After Abbess Nona's death, the double foundation is dissolved and the monastery is reformed to accept only male novices. At this point, the ink changes. The helpful scribe explains that for the new foundation, the abbot has mandated Stargall, not Ugall ink. He outlines the differences, use of inks of containment techniques with sky, not nectar context, but doesn't trouble to explain why. So we have one last core that we can use. I think we are going to take the opportunity to read another book here. And we are on to... On the White, I believe. Yes. So I think this time around I'll maybe try and use the Foss to read a book. On the White, Solomon Husher writes, perhaps allegorically, of winter and its long, slow, doomed romance with the sun. The epigraph is sunset at noon. On closer investigation, the work seems to be a theory of aesthetics, or perhaps a set of warnings about the dangers of painting. Husher writes distractedly about his suspicion of colors and his yearning for death. He hints at a great work he has envisaged or begun, where the palest of paintings will enthrall the world. He returns again and again to certain compelling phrases which he claims are the secret words of winter. All right. More sand. Yeah, I mean, we could make the money, but I think in this case I'll read something at Collar's desk. So I guess we're on to the Ivory Book. So just taking a quick look, we've got Konad Abydos, so this will be a pretty big block to get through, I think. But after that, that's pretty much the library. Like, we'll have a few in these remaining rooms here, but I'll probably need to start thinking about some alternative investigations. Alright, the Ivory Book, a manual of the Order Limea, an order of quasi-immortals who maintained a secret enclave at the source of the river Limia in the Roman province of Hispania Gallicaea. This manual was compiled by one Kurenai, who claims to have fled the tyranny of the Chrysanthemum throne to cross the world and join the Ordo. Members of the Ordo took an oath, the Ivory Chain, not to have commerce with the Hours. Followed literally, this would be almost impossible for an adept, so the manual contains numerous clarifications, exceptions, and processes of indulgence. Kurenai describes the Order's burial rites, which include spells to ensure, in theory, that the souls of dead long are not given to the Hours. The Hour called the Ivory Dove, who memorializes and commemorates, is to be invoked in secret in these rites, for with that Hour we have made an understanding. Okay, and we should have a little bit of time. I don't know if we'll be able to get through a full day, but we should at least be able to make a couple rounds on books. So I don't necessarily want to end these videos early. Oh, great. Okay, so we've also got the Raptures of Forculus. So we did actually get that on my Twitch playthrough through House of Light, but I know I've always had parts of these books. Now, if that's a 4-knock mystery, we're not going to get that many lessons out of it, but that's fine. Some lessons are better than others, and I think what I'll do is I will collect this book today, and we will read it the following day. But first things first, let's do Scar in the Sky. It's a good thing that I read the Ivory Book when I did, because we would have had a conflict in terms of languages. Konad Abydos we know quite well. Fallen Cross is the next one, I believe. Okay. Which one is this? Barrowchild's Elegies. Right. Wound Wounds, Killisimi text. That was actually the very first Killisimi text I ever ran into in the beta. And then 12 Letters on Consequence is known as Desk. Let's not do that. And then I think we just have the consider. Okay. Guess it doesn't really matter which one of these I use, but I'll go for Arab. Okay, so we'll make a little bit of money. In this case, we'll use the Whist. I could help with correspondence and arithmetic. There is no school in Brandkrug, and not everyone here knows their letters. And as usual, we will go beachcombing, although I'm starting to think I'll never get the thing I'm looking for. You know what? I think I forgot to... Yep, I forgot to keep the old moment. So I'll make sure I do that before the end of the... I'll make sure that I do that before the end of the season. An afternoon spent profitably reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. The Scar in the Sky. Nind wrote this and came to regret it. Each page of the book contains one word only, but as each page is turned, a knowledge creeps in. The final page is crowded. Each reader of the book records the same word. Now it is my turn. Konad Abydos, a play dealing with the 9-year sojourn of a snow goddess in the Thracian city of Abydos by Apollo Fireweaver, in English, published in 1892, purportedly from an older Greek text. The entity called Kion arrives in a blizzard and demands the city gates are barred. As Abydos falls under her spell, the dead return but do not speak. For 8 years, the city is a place of slow death, frosty ecstasy, and silent beauty, but in the 9th year, a conspiracy of shouts is mounted against the quiet that Kion demands. The conspirators open the city gates, and a scarred man comes to drag Kion out by the hair. Summer returns, but the conspirators die of remorse. Barrowchild's Elegies. The Barrowchild, a Gaulish adept who has won a place in the ranks of the Ordo Lemea, enumerates the great shadows laid to rest in the tombs of power and discusses their various conditions. The Barrowchild identifies numerous modes that are neither true death nor true life: the vitrification of the heart, the corrupt light of the wood, the core stasis, the wandering of the fet. The Barrowchild warns particularly of the avidity of tryst, where the remnant's shadow longing for change survives the sense of self and even devours its whist. That longing may draw the curious into the tomb, where the remnant shadow changes so that it cannot be distinguished from its visitor, or that the reverse becomes true, and that it is never again possible to say whether it is the shadow or the visitor that exits the tomb. The Wound Wounds, a history of 100 wars sewn into a design of metallic threads that pursues itself across every page. Darius and Alexander at Issus, the incandescent strivings of the houses of Lancaster and York, the Second Worm War. The final page of the book depicts the first battles of a war among ours, but the threads fray into alternatives, unbraiding from history. One of those threads is a coarse iron wire whose twist suggests the disciplines of the scar invoked before a subterranean configuration of iron, fire, and night. The Fallen Cross, in which Julian Cosley, magus, immortal, occasional anarchist, argues that through language the Carapace Cross decayed to seed the lives of our ancestors. Speech is a wound, silence is silver, there is no silver door, nor can there be, even in the moon's house. Without language there can be no words, without words there can be no message, but only in silence can there be no error. And lo, even in that beginning, in that first of messages, an error. Thus did we enter the house. The Book of the Centipede. In the mid-1860s, when Madame Yee presented an entertainment based, she claimed, on this book. The Centipede always found her way into the dark places. When she was punished for it, she reacted badly, in the Mansus as in Maya. The river runs through the sands out of myth and into legend. The painted river runs the other way. One is barred to the Centipede now, but she finds ways back in sometimes. The 12 Letters on Consequence, Julian Cosley's epistolatory treatise on what may come after, addressed to his once friend Claude Hersault and the mystic and antiquarian. By the time he wrote these letters, Cosley identified with the oneropolitical worms movement and Hersault with the birds, meaning roughly that Hersault held the order of the hours to be desirable and Cosley held it to be oppressive. Many of Cosley's arguments about consequence and finality are couched in erudite and practical alchemical terms. Others appear to be thinly veiled threats directed at Hersault. Some are both. The collected Hush House lectures. In the 1800s, Dr. Aaron Peel was invited to give a series of lectures to the Curia. They combine his pithy view of the histories with his particular brand of unhelpfully ironical insight. In 1776, the third history, Louis declares the Mask of Masks and forbids mention of the great writhing within the walls of the Palace of Versailles, although by this point, the worms are observed to move openly among the boulevards of Paris, sometimes even in daylight. The army is redeployed to defend the court. The mask lasts 1 lunar month and attracts several of the long abroad in Western Europe at the time, fleeing the worms, or hoping to take advantage of the desperate Louis, or seeking access to the sealed mirrors of the palace, or just eager to attend the most inventive and desperate debauch of the century. Many espouse wormish sympathies. Let 100 histories flourish. Tear down the tyranny of eternity. To grow long is usually to cast off these sympathies. There would be no immortality without eternity, and eternity, we often seem to decide, is only tyranny as long as we are not eternal. This is one thing that's always kind of neat with the alternative arrangements, is that you have connections. In this case, we've gotten quite a few items about the worms. Not necessarily... Well, there's obviously the worms of the Great Writhing, but that's also different from the worms, the political movement. I always like the worms in the scale as a description, especially in contrast to the birds. But yeah, it was definitely neat to see a few of those in relation to one another. Oops. The Orchid Transfigurations, A Feast, a compilation of quasi-Rosicrucian allegories, supposedly by Robert Flood. This is in the original Latin. The illustrations are certainly striking. They flush the skin and glow beneath the eyelids after the book is closed. We must devour to be devoured. We cannot be undevoured as we cannot be unborn. Now, we did have a clue. We're at the end of our time together, but let's see if I can work with this clue. Disciplines of the Scar. Guess it's my pick, but metal seems appropriate. Unveil a treasure of the house. Name the scars in iron and night to unveil a treasure of the house. And on that note, we will leave it for tonight, and in the next episode we will see what comes out of the box. But I am particularly, I do really like, I'd actually completely forgotten that one last bit on the wound wounds, specifically the implication in terms of sort of the fraying, sort of the fraying part and its relation to the oubliette. That was one thing that I maybe didn't quite pick up on, or didn't remember at least from a previous session. So always kind of fun to see the new things that I pick up, even on things that might be very familiar. In any case, thank you very much for watching. We should have at least one more for the week, so we will see you when we start unpacking the goodies and reading some more books. Take care.